welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. This is my first public kind of like talk in over 5 years. So we're going to find out together how it goes. The topic of this talk is radio hacking to failure to pixel crafting. And it's a little bit of, it's about radio hacking a little bit, specifically at the OSI physical layer, the radio wave level. You can do a lot of IoT hacking and that kind of stuff. We're going to talk about waves. Waves are fascinating. We're going to talk about burnout and a little career advice. Math and art. What's in it for you? I hope better appreciation for waves, an understanding of radio hacking a little bit more. The basic idea of how math art works, or how to do art with math. A little bit of business stuff and a little burnout stuff. The structure of this talk, thank you, Jeremy. The structure of this talk is we're going to have a quick story, talk about some waves, talking about hacking with waves, and then talking about doing art with waves. So for the story, I ended up getting into radio hacking, had a good bit of fun with it, did like a circuit of talks like DEF CON, blah, 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 and ended up learning about some wave math with that. And so I started doing art a little bit with it, and then I decided to try to there was a money grab opportunity, and I quit my job and I quit my art, which was a mistake in retrospect, I think. But and I tried to start a business startup in Colombia for a couple years. Me and my brother, we tried to do a kind of a pivoted like 3 times. So we tried to do like a home care app and a transit app, and ended up failing at that. But we'll come back to radio hacking in just a minute. With the startup, yeah, so the thing I learned is businesses are kind of like trees, like they have to grow organically. For us, our problem was that we were trying to do a transit app, and Uber basically had already taken the first step. So we were trying to do a group rides trip, and we were trying to have it where you have 2 or 3 people in a ride, but the first step of that is having 1 rider with 1 driver. And so we had a business that couldn't take little bites and grow. Businesses have to have some useful functionality that they can do right away, and then they have to grow on that. Anyway, that was something. The other thing, the biggest thing I learned though with the startup and with failing at it was not to only work for the destination, but to make sure that whatever you're doing, your heart is in it. Or you might fail and you might burn out, like I did. Burnout, like I said, some of the causes, my heart wasn't in it. Tension spread too thin. But I think a big part of it, surprisingly, was physical activity. I had not been exercising enough, and this is going to be a little bit of a tangent, and this talk is a little bit all over the place, as you are probably beginning to tell. But a little tangent, your lymphatic system, it basically requires physical movement to move waste products out of your body. And so and it doesn't have a pump like the circulatory system. So if you can look at where the lymph nodes are at. There's a lot on your hips, right? A lot around here. And if you're not physically moving those parts of your body, you're going to be full of shit, like in a literal way, because your body's not getting the waste products out. And that can make you feel more lethargic. And I think it can make you burn out. Because like the weird thing is, I started like doing more exercises like yoga and squats and push-ups and abs. And I know this is weird to talk about at a hacker conference, so I understand the weirdness. I think this stuff is actually, to me, it was surprisingly important. Like, I was walking every day, I was going paddleboarding twice a week, and I was doing house chores, but I wasn't doing some of the physical movements I needed, even with all that stuff. News to me. It was surprising. Within like a week of starting that stuff, I basically had this crazy thing where I basically decided I wanted to become a professional artist. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be shooting for career shift all of a sudden after a week. So it was pretty crazy. So I'd recommend making sure you're getting physical movement, exercise. Yoga is really good. Tangent over. Okay, so a little bit about waves. So I think waves are really awesome. You'll probably not find any person who appreciates waves more than I do. So you're talking to a wave fanatic tonight. All communication happens through waves, right? So my words that you're hearing are being carried through vibrations in the air. You can see me because of light, which is obviously vibration. Everything, all communication though, infrared, cellular, all of those are waves ultimately. So no communication happens without waves. Sine waves are mathematically very interesting for a number of reasons. Also, waves seem like maybe the essence of reality to some extent, or matter. Quantum perturbation theory says that even what we call particles, are waves, which is kind of cool. And they're everywhere, right? Like sunrises, sunsets. Your heart beats, breath in and out. There's kind of this yin-yang kind of nature to reality, it seems. I kind of already talked about this. This is kind of a list of just all the forms of communication that happen through waves. And, like I said, literally everything, literally all communication. I challenge you. I challenge you to find one form of communication that does not involve waves. And maybe there's one I'm missing, but I couldn't think of one. Okay, so a little bit more about waves from a mathematical perspective. I'm not going to have a bunch of equations, I promise. But this is the basic equation for a wave. It's basically, there's a couple components to it. There is the amplitude, which is how big the waves are. That would be and then there's frequency. That's like, how high or low the waves are. This is kind of a little esoteric, but there's a mathematical thing called the derivative of a function, which is basically its rate of change. And so the derivative of y equals x squared is 2x, for example. The derivative of a sine wave, though, happens to be another sine wave, which, so it's like the rate of change of a sine wave is itself a sine wave, and that goes on forever. So it's just kind of interesting. There's always change. Also, a cool thing, waves of differing frequencies are orthogonal to each other, which, that's a big word. It basically means like each wave, so like if I have like a line going this way and a line going this way at a 90-degree angle, they're orthogonal. And it's like they're two separate dimensions. They're two separate dimensions, okay? So any two different waves of differing frequency, let's say 100 hertz and 300 hertz, are different dimensions mathematically relative to each other. And so that makes it where you can add a bunch of waves together, and then because they're each in their own dimension, you can break them back out apart. That's why, for example, you can have 100 radio stations all broadcasting, and you can pick out one at a time, right? Like that's what's going on there. I talked about that. Okay, enough about waves. Now, a little bit about radio hacking, which of course involves waves. So a couple tools for anyone interested in getting into radio hacking. I highly recommend the HackRF. It's I think it was about $300, but it's a radio you can connect to your computer to do some, I think you can transmit and receive on everything from like 100 megahertz up to 6 gigahertz, which is most digital devices are operating within those frequencies. So that's crazy. GNU Radio is software. It's free software that runs on Linux that you could use. Python's really good. I have a reference to some hacking scripts right here as well, but I've got that link later. Most of the radio hacking, at least the radio hacking that you do with waves, is happening at what's called the OSI layer 1, which is the physical layer. So this is just a conceptual list of layers. Basically, physical just means how are the bits actually transmitted physically over the radio waves. And so real briefly, I want to give a little introduction to that. So digital data is transmitted over waves through what's called modulation. And so there's different kinds of modulation. AM, we've all heard of AM radio and FM radio. AM is amplitude modulation and FM is frequency modulation. And all that means is that basically, let's say you want to represent there's one more called phase modulation, but he's not the cool kid. Amplitude modulation looks like this. So like if you're wanting to transmit the data 0, 1, you would do it by increasing the amplitude. So that would be like right? Like 0, 1. FM would do it by frequency. So that'd be like right? And okay, so now just a little bit about, and again, this is just very overviewy, but the basics of doing radio hacking with waves is you can do what's called like a brute force attack. So you can say, if you reverse engineer how a radio transmitter or radio device, what protocol it uses, if you reverse engineer that, you can then say, okay, I know it transmits 12 bits basically as a code, and that means turn on this outlet or turn it off, let's say, or disarm the security system. So you can just you can basically use this kind of frequency or amplitude modulation to transmit that data. And it's basically creating the mod half of a modulator demodulator, also known as a modem. So that's like the half of it. Okay, a couple other radio hacking methods just to touch on, just because it would be incomplete without it, I think, would be, like I said, you can modulate signals to do like brute force attacks where maybe you try every combination that's available. You can also do something like way dumber and simpler, which is called a replay attack. And a replay attack is you basically just record the radio waves and you just play them back. And something like a hack RF, that's very simple. But the thing is, and this is going to become a problem probably more and more in the physical world, a lot of these things are security by obscurity. And so the vendors are assuming that no one can communicate on these frequencies and that kind of thing. A lot of industrial control systems, a lot of big systems that in a intense geopolitical time where people are trying not to be nuked back could be viable attack vectors. So anyway. And the last is the simplest, which is just a jamming attack. So a cool example of a jamming attack, for example, would be at my old house, we had a security system, and basically it's like one of those ones where it's wireless, and so there's like a magnetic door sensor, and then there's like a hub, right? And the hub is connected to the internet and that kind of thing. And but if you know what the device is, and you look on the back of it, there's an FCC number. You can look up that FCC number and you know what frequency it operates on. With that, you can just jam that frequency, which is just transmitting a high amplitude wave on that, say, 715 hertz. And if you do that, like in the case of my security system, the door sensor transmits the message that it was opened, but the hub never gets it. So that's it. Bypassed. That simple. So stuff to watch out for potentially. One other kind of cool thing with frequencies, you know how I was saying that waves of differing frequencies are basically like different dimensions, okay? And that are orthogonal. That means basically they don't have anything in common. But have you ever been like on an analog radio, like your FM radio in your car? You're turning the knob and it goes a wing, and then it tunes into the signal. That wing. You see the shape here? That's the shape of it right there. It's called the sync function. The function is y equals sine of x divided by x. But this is cool. I don't want to like get into the code, and you don't have to understand the code. But basically, what I'm doing here is I'm taking a frequency of 20 hertz, and then I'm creating another frequency that's between 10 hertz off and another frequency goes between 10 and 30. And I'm basically looking at the dot product, which is basically a sign of how much resonance there is, basically how tuned in it is. And so you can see the shape that it makes is called a sync function. And anyway, I think it's a beautiful function. It actually approximates like a ripple, kind of like a drop in water pattern. And I've used it extensively in my art. And so I guess that's kind of the last part of the story is getting into math art and stuff like that. So this is actually a bunch of sync functions all stacked. But okay, so how do you draw with math? So you can there's different equations, right? Like the circle equation is x squared plus y squared equals 9, and basically the way that graphs work is so this equation you can see there's the left side of the equation is x squared plus y squared equals 9. The right side is 9, right? So graphs usually work where you only draw where the left side is precisely equal to the right side of the equation. So it's black, or in this case it's red, on every point where the left and right side of the equations are exactly equal. So I was kind of curious though, thinking about that, and I was thinking like what if you could also see like where they're not just equal, but where they're close to equal? Like what would that look like? And it looks like this. So I wanted to just show like a little bit of, let me see, y equals x, for example. And basically what I'm doing, the way to do this is I'm just subtracting the left side from the right side. That's my error, right? So if x equals 0 and y equals 0, then they're equal. If x equals 0 and y equals 100, the error is 100. So you can do all kinds of cool stuff. You can do y equals sine of x. You can do things like, let's increase the frequency. Or we can increase it more. We could, let's go down a little bit. We can make the amplitude bigger. I actually had a lot of these made, but I didn't take notes on what they were. Anyway, I think you get the idea. You can just basically paint with equations. And so that's kind of what I've been doing. So most of my art, since I've been doing it, every piece is basically a program. And hey, I'm just basically setting pixels, pixel by pixel, using math, which is, it's kind of cool because it's kind of, I'm not using any fancy libraries, I don't need it. I'm not even doing it. Like, I know that my stuff would benefit from like GPU acceleration and stuff, but I really like the simpleness of the code. And ultimately, you can do all the same amazing kind of stuff just with the CPU it's just slower, but I'm waiting on it to be automatically accelerated for me, so I don't have to learn all of the GPU stuff. Because it's coming. There's like this new language called Mojo. Have y'all heard of that? It's like a new Python that's like automatically GPU accelerated. I've been waiting for that. In conclusion, waves are awesome. Math can be pretty. Radio hacking is fun. Pay attention to your heart. Pay attention to your interests. I think your emotions are there for a reason, and you should pay attention. Flush your lymphatic system, I recommend. Sorry for just reading the slides on these. It's been a while. Anyway, also, do art. And, what is art is kind of a philosophical debate, but I think it's really anything. And the most important medium of art is life. And, like, it's legit, right? Like, you could be writing a story and you got a character in the story. But you have a character and we have a character, and it's good to make it, good to focus on that art and not get distracted by lower forms of art, whatever that may be. But that's it. I got a few links here. But thank y'all for staying out late. Appreciate it. Wow, and that was way shorter than an hour. So I guess if y'all got any questions or anything, you're welcome to fire away. Yeah, Kyle. That one is z equals z squared plus c. And it's really crazy with that one. Because you can zoom into that shape literally forever. It actually goes on forever. And all these amazing shapes come out of it. And so, I call it God's art because all of those lines and stuff, I'm not like the one I'm choosing the colors. I'm choosing the exactly the position. In some ways, computers are almost like telescopes, right? Like this is an aspect of reality, right? That this one is actually zoomed in about 4 billion times. No, this one's like, I think, 80 billion times. So like it would be completely impossible to see these shapes without computers, right? But anyway, there's some z equals z squared plus c coming up with all that stuff. Whatever you want to call that, God, universe, whatever that is, hey, that's what the name is from. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, a guy bought that piece just before, so that was like my lifetime second art sale ever. So, yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, Grant.
Would you be interested in live coding anything up that you're interested in? You can maybe explain it to us, or?
Oh, yeah, that's a cool idea. I'm gonna like cheat just a little bit because I think I had some of these saved up. Oh yeah, like let me see. There was like some interesting ones. Oh yeah, let me show you that one. That's I just want to show you that sync function because I think that's a particularly interesting function. Sine of x divided by x. All right, so hey, that's what it looks like. I also changed the fuzzy level, which is how you play with the error. Let me see. That's not very good, so let's increase the frequency. Or the amplitude. Increase the frequency. No, too high. Yeah, so something like that. Now, to be honest, by the way, I should mention, so just this is an open source program called truthygraph.github.io. If y'all have any kids or know of any kids, for example, who you want to get more interested in math, I think it's cool. Open source, so it's out there. Basically, it's a single HTML file. So there's not like a server, or anything like that. So it's very simple. Also, actually, I should probably mention, you can also like share truthy graphs because the equation and stuff and all the settings are saved in the URL. So I can like, save that, send it to someone. So you can kind of like save cool functions you find or, that kind of thing. Yeah. But most of the stuff I do is a good bit more complicated. Where you couldn't do all the same stuff than truthy graph, but you can do a lot of cool stuff. So, yeah. Any other questions? I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, Grant.
Caleb, you covered OSI networking layer 1, you covered calculus, you covered a number of interesting things. Where might someone start that wasn't familiar with any of these things?
Yeah, so my college professor was this guy named Peter Hamburger, and everyone hated him. He was like super hard and stuff, and he had this cool German accent. Or I remember for a long time he was talking about the Waldorfian principle, and I wrote in my notes Waldorfian. Later I was like reading the textbook, and it was like the well-ordering principle. I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, he was a cool guy. He recommended this math book to me called Who is Fourier? And it's a mathematical adventure, I think is the subtitle. But it's supposedly it's written by kids. It's like got little kids drawings and stuff like that. I think that's got to be BS. Like there's a little too much advanced stuff, but there's probably an adult like guiding the kids, right? Teenagers. Anyway, from Japan. Anyway, it's like a really good math book to. It's not done like a math book. It's like a story kind of exploring waves and stuff. But it's for kids, or so for adults, it's a nice simple intro. Might as well put on some in the background. Any other questions? White noise? Oh, doing anything with white noise? Yeah. I think so. So I've done some. I've done some cellular automata that kind of just did random stuff. So that's kind of like that. But I don't know. Yeah, it'd be interesting to explore. Yeah. What in the world is going on with that? It's whoa, what? Huh. I basically everything is pure Python. And I guess to be a little more specific, I use Python using the only library I use most of the time. There's actually one other, but the main one I use is called the Python image library. Pillow is, I think its new name is Pillow. And so I use that, just with pure math, to set pixels. And then to actually make a video, I use FFmpeg, which is just a command line program. And you basically just can tell it a folder with a bunch of images named like image 1, image 2, image 3, image 4. And it can basically just automatically suck that in and make like an MP4 video. So yeah, that's how we do animation. Krista.
How long does it take you to make one of your pieces of work?
Well, it kind of depends. Basically, like I tend to develop different like path or different styles of programs, And like developing a new style might take months. But then once I have that new like kind of framework, then I could do a new one in, maybe an hour or something. And oh yeah, Grant.
Please comment on AI and art.
Yeah. So I don't use any AI in my art, first thing, which is probably really suspicious given that I am an AI consultant as by day. But it's like, in some ways, I think that no one pulls from nowhere, even us humans, right? Like we're all just recycling what we've already seen. And I think the AI is doing that too. And we're what would you say? We're copying God maybe directly, us human artists, and maybe the AI is copying us humans in the same way. But I mean, I think at the same time, it seems, it's a hard thing because how much if a person says, "Look at my AI artwork," and they just type some words in, that doesn't feel like it's as much them, and it's really not, right? But the thing is, though, none of the art we do is really just ours anyway. I mean, I was thinking about, for example, how many humans went into making this art, and I think about myself, some of the people I work with, and then like this Mac computer, probably 1 million people, right, went into building that. This Mac OS, Python, it's kind of like millions of people, right? So we're all kind of not just on our own. But yeah.
Business question for you.
Yeah.
And obviously, like you kind of talked about running a business and it's iterative. How do you deal with things like with your art? Like somebody takes a picture of it, clones it, makes their own, voila. You see it on T-shirts, Instagram, all that. What, from a business perspective, where does that fit for you?
I'm not too worried about it. It's some of it's pretty hard. I mean, someone could definitely replicate it, but it's you can't. If you're just following, it's probably not going to be worth as much money anyway. So, but yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, I think that wraps it up, y'all. So thanks again for coming.